I want to get into this as well, because this kind of goes to this is the sort of full circle effect of where I sense we kind of began sort of last March, April time, when we started talking about vaccinations and putting aside all the mad conspiracy theorists about vaccination is going to make you grow two heads, it's designed to sterilize us and all this old garbage that gets thrown out of there. I think most of us have grown up, and even some people that once were suspicious about that are no longer. They've realised that if we didn't have social media around, we wouldn't even be thinking about it in those kind of terms. But the myriad of stories that are sort of out there about vaccines and why you should be careful of all of this absolute cobblers that you will find. And as we're going to talk later on a completely different issue, some people that still kind of penetrates and they take that and think I'm now scared of having something. Nonetheless, the question that I suppose came up fairly early doors was whether or not it would be compulsory. And it would be extraordinary to live in a society where you were compelled to have a vaccine. You don't have to have the flu. I've never had a flu vaccine in my life. I work on the same basis. The reason why I can't remember the last time I took a paracetamol. I'd rather enjoy, if I can, enjoy the experience of not having to take a drug if possible. But if I was in hospital and I had something terribly wrong and I needed the correct medication, I see no reason why I would turn that down. And the COVID one, I'll probably take the same counsel as I have with the flu jab. It might change, I don't know. It might change. I think it changes as well a little bit when this is a separate point almost, but when those around, when you know somebody who's had COVID or when somebody who's had it badly, I think we all now know somebody who's had it. And we know quite a lot of people, I certainly do, who had it and had almost no symptoms at all. And that does seem to be still very typical of quite a huge chunk of the population. You'll hardly know it went through you and out it came. But of course, there are just too many people that don't react like that. And it doesn't take that many to tip the balance, end up in hospital, some on ventilators, some don't make it. Hence the kind of figures that we are seeing from the NHS. I think we can all now, as grown-ups, agree on that. But the point was that the vaccination would be a choice. You don't have to have it. And then we started sort of seeing stories like, was it Qantas Airlines, I think, wasn't it, in Australia, where the chief exec gave an interview on one of the Aussie networks and said, we will either consider or we are going to, we won't let people travel unless you've had the vaccine. You start to think, okay, this is a bit interesting, isn't it? And then today I read this and I don't know if I should be surprised or not, bearing in mind where it came from. A firm of London plumbers are looking at introducing a no jab, no job policy, requiring all of its workers to be vaccinated against COVID. This is Charlie Mullins. How many times have we spoken to Charlie Mullins? He kind of divides the room, Charlie, now, mainly on his Brexit credentials, because Charlie is your absolute archetypal working class boy made good. It started off with a manky old van and a bag of spanners. He's now a multi-millionaire and runs one of the biggest plumbing empires in the land, Pimlico Plumbers. He says he's been talking to his lawyers about making vaccine mandatory for all new people he hires within the next few months. They're also exploring ways of modifying existing staff contracts, he said. Although he said no one would be forced to receive a vaccine or be fired over the issue. But the government, of course, have pledged to vaccinate 15 million people in Britain by mid-Feb. So that's 200,000 doses a week. So vaccinations might be available soon on the high street, we understand, alongside around 50 hubs that'll be dispensing vaccinations as well. Mr. Mullins said he was willing to pay for those private immunisations for those at Pimlico Plumbers should they become available. He said he set aside £800,000 to pay for inoculations for more than 400 workers. He said, we wouldn't dream of forcing anyone, but I'm pretty much certain that 99% of staff would jump at the opportunity, he said. And he might be right on that. But new people coming into the company may well, according to this, no jab, no job. Now, this is just one company, albeit a large one and a very successful one, and pretty high profile. Charlie is a regular on the circuit. And the reason I mentioned Charlie dividing the room is because you think about this kind of good, I don't want to say Jack the Lad in a pejorative sense, but he is, your cheeky chappy, boy made good. But when it came to Brexit, he was about as ferocious a Remainer as you could possibly get. He even put a sign on his building, remember that? Testicles to Brexit. He didn't write testicles, he actually wrote right across his HQ to Brexit. And I think a lot of people thought Charlie might have the very opposite view to that. Nonetheless, so Charlie's media appearances are always interesting. We are going to speak to him in a little bit as well. But I want to throw this out to you. No job, no jab. So are we now essentially seeing compulsory vaccinations by the back door? Not through any sinister reason. I don't think this is because, secretly the Gates Foundation had this planned all along. I know there's going to be people listening to this now who genuinely believe that stuff, and they believe it because they've just been badly educated by mischievous internet posts and goodness knows what else, and a few people who either purport to be doctors or were doctors, or the very tiny minority who have an alternative view. So it wouldn't be because of that. But what if you just don't want to jab? Does that mean you're unemployable for the rest of time? Should we be worried about? Heck, should we be worried about this? Of course we should be worried about this. Where does that stop? Well, is my boss going to say to me, everybody who works in this building must be vaccinated? It might come to that. And you can only imagine, bearing in mind the contagion of what seems to be the right thing to do. The idea that a company, big high street names, people-facing organisations, my guess is that probably most companies will end up adopting this policy. And the only thing that's curious about it is I can't think of another ailment where they have this policy for. You don't have it for flu, do you? Every year there is flu. Flu can be devastating to some people. It takes the lives of many on an annual basis. Does anyone know what's happened to flu this year, by the way? Can we have the flu numbers? I saw some WHO graph, one of the many graphs. I'm all graphed out. I don't know about you. I'm so graphed out, it's crazy. I'm sure there was one that's almost said flatline, no flu. Has COVID just taken over the flu? Has flu gone? Is it just not a bad year for the flu? Can somebody tell me? 0344 499 1000 is where you'll find us. Would you support a no jab, no job policy? Now, based on the number of people we are constantly told support lockdowns, which is around about, 78% of people, I think, in the last report for this latest lockdown, 78% of people support it, and you think, that's interesting. That it doesn't mean they enthuse about it. It doesn't mean they're happy about it, but support it. So most people support it. You'd have to extrapolate from that most people would support the no jab, no job policy. 0344 499 1000. Would you put your name to that? And think about the job you do, for example. If you are people facing, as we begin the process of coming out of this, we can all sit there from afar and say, isn't it brilliant? They're vaccinating people. Sooner or later, we're going to hit the tipping point where it becomes safe to reopen up our country, allow people to feed their kids and earn a living and actually walk further than half a foot from their own front door. A little bit of freedom back. Boy, it's funny, isn't it, what we're grateful for? We're grateful for the default position of being a human being. Such is life and such is the nature of this. There's no way back on that. We can't change what has happened. But as we get our way out of this, I'm just sensing, I think most of us, brilliant, the vaccines are out there, great, we'll soon be back to normal. Well, that only happens if more and more people have the vaccine. And that's not just going to be old and vulnerable. They're talking about over 50s by the end of February or March or something. And then the next age group. So if you consider that as a breaking deal on being hired, we will hire you for your dream job, but you have to have the vaccine. It ain't sinister, but somewhere in there you sense, because it's quite hard to construct an argument against it. If there's nothing wrong with it, then fine. But what if you just don't like having medicine? I don't like taking medicine. I never have done. And the longer I can go without having to, fantastic. 0344 499 1000. And I'd be intrigued to know, because I don't believe Charlie Mullins will be the only boss in Britain who's pondering this one right now. There must be others out there. There must be other companies or organisations that are considering the no jab, no job policy. 0344 499 1000. Lines are open now. Charlie Mullins with us in a couple of moments' time to explain more on that. Let me bring you a couple of comments here. Tony, this is reference compulsory vaccinations or vaccinations in order to work. No jab, no job. Tony Neville says, at the end of the day, many plumbers will be going into people's homes to carry out work, so surely being vaccinated makes sense to protect the homeowner and themselves, although a totally different take here from Anthony Stokes, who says this is just the start. You'll be issued with a vaccine card in due course, which proves you've had the jab, and you'll be required to show it in places like job interviews, supermarket shops, cinemas, stadia, etc. Those no mask, no entry signs will soon be no vaccine card, no entry. Thoughts on that? 0344 499 1000. Now, a firm of London plumbers is looking at introducing a no jab, no job policy requiring all of its workers to be vaccinated against coronavirus. Charlie Mullins, founder of Pimlico Plumbers, has said he's talking to his lawyers about making the vaccine mandatory for all new hires within the next few months. The firm also exploring how it might modify existing staff contracts. However, he's insisted that no one would be forced to receive a vaccine or be fired over the issue. Charlie Mullins joins us now. How are you, Charlie?
Yeah, very good, Ian. And you got it dead right what you just said. We're not forcing anyone into it. We're basically going to adjust our lawyers are going to adjust the contracts accordingly, and all staff members have a choice whether they happy for it or not happy for it or sign for it. I would like to also add is if and when it does come out privately, I'm happy to pay for everybody that works for Pimlico Plumbers if they want to have the vaccine. Not trying to jump the queue on. I think we know there's a lot of people in front of us, elderly, vulnerable, frontline people, but I don't think it's too far away from coming out there. And I believe that by doing what we're doing, we're obviously going to get, roll the vaccine out quicker. Safety is the most important thing behind this for our staff and obviously for our customers.
In terms of new hires, though, Charlie, I mean, that's where I think a lot of eyebrows have been raised. No jab, no job.
Yeah, look, I don't see what's wrong with that. Obviously, there's going to be certain people that can't have the jab for whatever their reasons are. And there's various reasons, that are genuinely out there. And that's fine. But I'm not prepared to bring somebody into the workplace or send somebody to a customer's house that has not had the jab.
But what if I turn up and I decide, I've loved being in radio and I've known you for a bit, Charlie, and I think, where would I want to work next? Pimlico Plumbers is my calling. Get me over there with a bag of spanners and I'll do a wonderful job for you, Charlie. However, I don't want to have that vaccine because I don't have flu vaccines and I don't take paracetamol, so I don't fancy it. What are you going to turn me down at that point?
Well, I'll just say jab on, really, because, that's what we're going to do. Look, I'll ask you the question, Ian. If I could offer you a plumber or engineer that has had the vaccine to come to your house and one that didn't, which one are you going to pick?
Yeah, you see, that's exactly the question I sort of raised at the beginning of this, that, it's very hard to say it's a bad thing to be vaccinated unless it's a personal choice. But we kind of end up in, I don't want to sound like a conspiracy theorist here, but you end up in that territory where people who say this is a compulsory vaccination, it kind of ends up becoming a compulsory vaccination because companies like yourselves won't be hiring anybody. And I'm sure you're just the first of many that are considering this.
That's right. I think Unilever, the great big company, they're already saying that they're going to do the same policy. They're all actually saying, which I don't agree with, that they're going to get rid of some of their staff if they disagree to have it. I don't agree with that because, people have been on board a long time. And, I think there's a way of working with your staff and, it's going to be their own choice. But 99% of people I know would queue up all night to get the vaccine at the moment. And, tell people that have lost members of family that, you're not going to have the vaccine. And, the people that unfortunately have passed away, I think, they would have loved to have had the vaccine, had the test. Yeah. But unfortunately, we got a bit behind it. So I'm not doing nothing wrong. I'm actually protecting people's lives, protecting people's jobs, and running a business.
And protecting workers as well. And I mean, I don't imagine you're going to lose any business because of somebody's stance on the vaccine. What about your current workers then? You said you're not going to fire anybody, but you might alter contracts. What does that mean?
Well, our lawyers and HR are working on it. We can add that we recommend and suggest that they have a vaccine, and that all their staff will eventually have the vaccine. And I think a lot of people, they've got to see a bit of common sense here. They've got family at home. We're going in people's houses. So, I feel people will adjust accordingly. But again, it's their choice. But, why would you turn something down that could possibly save your life?
In terms of a time frame on this, I mean, as you say, maybe we've got to wait until these sort of private hubs open up around the country. What's your information on this in terms of when you could begin this process of vaccinating your staff?
Yeah, well, I don't think none of us know that at the moment, but I personally don't think it's too far away. And I think when the government again realised that, if they can get it out to not pharmacists, surgeries, and a lot of people that can have it done privately, then I think that'll increase the figures of the vaccinations very, very quickly. I don't know. I mean, I can't say, but I think if we was talking in 2 or 3 months' time, you'll probably find over 50% of the UK's had it, and we're very close to getting everybody that wants to have it done. And I'm just sort of saying, I'm not going to bring people into my workplace that have not had the vaccine and put other staff members or customers at risk.
Charlie Mullins, thank you. I hear you loud and clear. Thank you for that. And if you're listening to this and want to respond to what you heard from Charlie there, it's a kind of double-edged sword of a response in a way, because there's nothing to, I get it. I understand why Charlie Mullins would want to do that. But I also understand why somebody might not want to have the vaccination. Jeff says, Ian Collins, you're a total hypocrite. You say you won't have the jab, and then a minute later you say everybody should have the jab. I didn't say that at all. It's up to you whether you have the jab. I have no idea, Jeff, where you got that from. Completely up to you. I said that we celebrate the fact that more people are having it, because that's a key to the unlocking of the current world we're in. That lockdown will at some point go away, and it will only begin to go away when more people have the vaccine. That's what I meant about the double-edged sword, but I certainly don't think you should make it mandatory for people. The question becomes whether life is just impossible unless you've had the vaccine. I mean, we're talking about Pimlico Plumbers here. He mentioned Unilever. What about, as somebody else just mentioned to me, going to the cinema, going to a gig, going to a restaurant? Yeah, you can all come in. You got your vaccination passes. Fantastic, in you come. On the face of it, it kind of makes sense. I understand it. But that doesn't mean to say I haven't got this kind of duality of responses to this, because I have. Because a big part of it thinks, well, how can you compel somebody to have that? And why don't we do it with the flu virus? I know this is more virulent, but you take the point.